Hi everyone and welcome to Supergrads. My name is Abhyansh Sir and I'm ready with yet another session on Flamingo. So today we start with the poetry part of Flamingo. Flamingo में पांच poems हैं and उनमें से दो first two poems, that is My Mother at 66 and Keeping Quiet. दोनों ही poems काफी emotional, काफी poignant. There's a lot of similarities between these two poems. मजा आएगा आपको. So I hope everyone is ready, guys, and it's time we begin with our session for today. So हमेशा की तरह I have about the poet वाला part, backdrop of a particular poem, summary, literary devices, the poetic devices that we have used in these poems, and of course followed by MCQs. So I hope everyone is ready and excited for the session. Let's begin, students. Let's start. And here is our first poem, that is My Mother at 66 by Kamla Das. And ये poem यार, ये poem पढ़ के ना, ये poem पढ़ के I also get very emotional, very emotional. So again, as I said, there's very much similarity between My Mother at 66 and Keeping Quiet. So Kamla Das के बारे में पहले थोड़ा discussion, what kind of a poet was she? And of course, इस poem में जो जो चीजें discuss करी हैं, उस पे बात करते हैं. So Kamla Das, also known as Madhavi Kutti in Malayalam, was one of the most powerful and confessional voices in Indian English literature. She was born in this place in Kerala into a literary family. Her mother was a poet and her father worked with the Times of India. So you can expect कि अगर उनके अंदर इतनी अच्छी skills थी तो वो skills कहाँ से आ रही थी? Because her mother was also a poet, her father was also someone who used to write for the Times of India. So of course very knowledgeable, intellectual people इनके parents थे. And Kamla Das is renowned for her bold, honest, emotionally intense poetry. Her poetry is bold, honest, and mainly based on real life situations. Kamla Das की इस poet के अलावा भी if you go and read any other poem, you would feel emotionally attached to the kind of work she has written. So that's about the poem, the poet rather. Now backdrop क्या है, ये poem किस background पे set हुई है, क्या reason था, so ये समझते हैं. Now written by Kamla Das, the poem is rooted in a personal moment of transition and emotional reckoning. Now, she emphasizes on the word transition. Transition is a phase जहां पर एक चीज खत्म हो रही है और दूसरी चीज स्टार्ट हो रही है, न्यू बिगिनिंग्स. सो द बीच में जो फेज है, दैट इज व्हाट वी कॉल ट्रांजिशनल. ठीक है. देन it was composed when the poet was traveling from Cochin, her hometown, to Bangalore, accompanying her aging mother in that particular car that was discussed in the poem. कि वहां पे पूरा बैकड्रॉप है और घर से लेके एयरपोर्ट तक की जो जर्नी होती है ना, द काइंड ऑफ थॉट्स दैट पास हर माइंड, हर तरह के थॉट्स उसके दिमाग में आ रहे हैं और पूरी पोएम उसी पे सेट है. Observing her mother asleep in the car, the poet is suddenly confronted with the harsh reality of aging and mortality. When she saw her mother dozed off, taking a nap, उसके दिमाग में ये थॉट्स आ रहे थे कि यार अब मदर और कितने साल रहेंगी, कितने साल हम टाइम उनके साथ दे सकते हैं. सो एजिंग, ओल्ड एज अल्टीमेटली लीड्स टू डेथ, ये थॉट उसके दिमाग में चल रहे थे. The backdrop is not dramatic, but it is ordinary, which makes the poem deeply universal. Universal matlab every person can relate to this. A routine journey becomes a moment of existential realization. The inevitability of loss. Inevitability is something that you cannot avoid. So, a normal, ordinary car ride feels very emotional कि अब old age ultimately leads to death and mortality. The fear of separation, the silent pain of adult children who cannot openly express their vulnerability. They cannot express to their parents कि आप नहीं रहोगे तो हमारा क्या होगा. So that is what they have discussed. Adult children लिखने का यहाँ पे यही मोटिव था. ठीक है. So that's the backdrop of the poem. And what does it reflect? It reflects modern urban life, Cochin to Bangalore. That is what that is where the poet was going. Emotional restraint and contemporary relationships. The contrast between inner turmoil and outward composure. Although she is in a state of turmoil, but she cannot express that. She tries to keep herself calm and composed even at the airport when she was leaving for Bangalore. अंदर चल रहा है कॉन्ट्रास्ट, अंदर डर है कि अगली बार जब आएंगे मदर होंगी नहीं होंगी, बिकॉज ओल्ड एज अल्टीमेटली लीड्स टू डेथ. एंड उसके बाद भी शी इज ट्राइंग टू कीप अ स्माइलिंग फेस कि मदर को वो पेन फील ना हो. सो ये पोएम में पूरा रिफ्लेक्शन है. And the poem opens with the poet driving her mother from Cochin airport. Her mother, which is of course aged 66 as the title of the poem suggests, is asleep with her wide mouth open, appearing pale and lifeless like a corpse. Like a corpse. Corpse is a dead body, human dead body. Good evening, bitter. Then this disturbing image instantly fills the poet with fear and anxiety about her mother's approaching death. अपनी मदर को सोते हुए वो जो देखती है, that is the point where she feels कि यार काफी एज होती जा रही है, my mother is getting old day by day. and फिर से वही बात, old age ultimately leads to death. ठीक है. To distract herself from these unsettling thoughts, the poet looks outside the window and observes young trees sprinting past and merry children spilling out of their homes. So that is the contrast that has been discussed. एक तरफ वो अपनी मदर को देख रही है, अब वो जो भी उसके अंदर apprehensive thoughts आ रहे हैं उसको हटाने के लिए she starts looking outside the window. एंड वहां पर उसको लाइफ दिख रही है, ट्रीज दिख रहे हैं, चिल्ड्रन दिख रहे हैं. सो अगेन ओल्ड एज, यूथ एंड ओल्ड का वहां पे कंपैरिजन है. These images of these trees and children symbolize life, vitality and continuity, sharply contrasting with her mother's frailty and stillness. Frailty is weakness. So there's a sharp contrast here. Hi guys, मेरा नाम अभ्यांश चौहान and I have been taking sessions on CBSE I think since the beginning of this month and अभी आगे भी बहुत sessions होने वाले हैं. So अभी Flamingo पे discussion हो रहा है. Once we will be done with Flamingo हम Vistas की तरफ भी move करेंगे. And upon reaching the airport, the poet bids farewell to her mother. Despite being overwhelmed by the fear of losing her, she forces a smile. She forces a smile. Smile is something that must come naturally to everyone, but she is made to force that smile. क्या reason है? Because अंदर emotional turmoil है, अंदर डर है, but she tries to keep a happy face. She tries to stay calm and composed. See you soon, Amma. This smile is not of happiness but of suppressed emotional pain that she had. Suppressed emotional pain that she had. Reflecting emotional maturity and helpless love. The poem ends not with resolution but with emotional restraint, highlighting the quiet suffering involved in loving aging parents. एजिंग पेरेंट्स के ऊपर ये सारा डिस्कशन चल रहा था. ठीक है. ग्रामर की लाइव क्लास स्टार्ट होने वाली है इन द मंथ ऑफ जनवरी. जैसे ही हम सीबीएसई की फ्लेमिंगो और विस्टा खत्म करेंगे, फरवरी से विल बी कमिंग अप विद ग्रामर, वोकैबुलरी, आरसीज, जो आपके सीवीटी में इंपॉर्टेंट है वो सब होगा. बट सीवीटी का डिस्कशन बाद में. फर्स्ट वील टॉक ओनली अबाउट सीबीएसई. नाउ the poetic devices that are used in this poem. the poetic devices that are used in this poem. So simile, as a corpse, like a dead body. So we know कि simile में we compare two objects, two dissimilar objects based on a similar quality, and the words that we use are as and like. So compares mother's appearance to a dead body, intensifying her fear. खुद के thoughts में ही Kamala Das was so involved in it. So that was the use of simile. और क्या usage है यहाँ पे? So there is usage of imagery as well. There is usage of imagery as well. Ashen face, sprinting trees, merry children. So creates vivid contrast between death and life. Children and mother, दोनों के बीच में it creates a contrast of things कि mother old age, children वो young children वहाँ पे घूम रहे हैं. ठीक है. Next up we have contrast of course. So old mother versus young tree and children reinforces theme of aging versus vitality. Reinforces that theme, that contrast of aging versus vitality. Repetition. Now at the end of the poem, when it concludes, she smiles and smiles and smiles. So your word smile, 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 repetition. And of course she does that to hide her feelings, her pain, her fear that she was developing. So emphasizes emotional, yes, it is for emotional suppression, hide karna, suppress karna, that is what she was trying to do. So repetition ke through ye ho raha hai. Then there is symbolism. There is symbolism. There are when we talk about symbolism, मतलब कोई भी चीज किस चीज को symbolize कर रहा है in broader context. So airport symbolized separation, smile symbolized emotional control, trees and children were symbolizing life's continuity, that life goes on and on and on. Then there is use of enjambment as well. Enjambment में क्या होता है? जहाँ पे कोई flow नहीं है, कोई rhythm नहीं है, कोई punctuation नहीं है. So poem में बहुत जगह पे ऐसा हुआ है. Lines flow without punctuation, without mirroring the poet's stream of thought. मतलब कोई rhythm वहाँ पे missing है. So enjambment is also used in this poem. And that brings us to, I have 10 MCQ type questions, students. So I hope if there are, of course, questions from this chapter, My Mother at 66 in your CBSE board and pre-board exam, आप summary भी लिख पाओगे, आप long answer के questions भी लिख पाओगे, short answer भी लिख पाओगे. ठीक है, क्योंकि इस poem पे already काफी discussion हो चुका है. So अब बात करते हैं about the 10 MCQs that I have. So here's your first question. The mother's open mouth suggests what? Sleep, illness, death-like stillness, or exhaustion. So here is your first question, students. Here's your first MCQ. I would want everyone to give it a try and देखते हैं आप ये कर पाते हैं या नहीं. So in this question, her open mouth suggests death-like stillness. Death-like stillness. Next question. The poet's immediate emotional response on seeing her mother is what? Anger, fear, detachment, or relief? Anger, fear, detachment of or relief. So when the poet looks at her mother, she of course has fear because her mother is aging, and of course age ke baad it leads to death. So she had immediate emotional response that she had was fear. Fear of her mother's old age. Fear of her mother's old age. Here is the next question. Sprinting tree symbolize what? Sprinting tree क्या symbolize करता है? Sprinting tree क्या symbolize करता है? Escape, speed of time, youth and vitality, or does it symbolize chaos? So sprinting tree passage में poem में example था youth and vitality, sprinting trees and those children. Here is the next question. Why does the poet look outside the car window? For curiosity, for boredom, to distract herself from painful thought, or to admire Mother Nature. So while she was in the car and she looked at her mother, so बहुत negative, बहुत ऐसे thoughts आ रहे थे काफी ज़्यादा. So to distract herself from those thoughts, she started looking outside the window. So to distract herself from painful thoughts जो उसके दिमाग में बार बार आ रहे थे. The tone of the poem is best described as what? Nostalgic, melancholic and restrained, angry or celebratory. क्या tone होना चाहिए? Now when we say student something is nostalgic, nostalgic means you're thinking about good things of your past. ठीक है? Then you have melancholic and restrained. So yes, she had restrained emotions. She was not able to express her emotions. And melancholy, of course, is related to sadness. So the tone of this poem is a little sad and restrained because she is trying to control over her emotions. Here is the next question. The airport symbolizes journey, model life, temporary separation, or inevitable. So inevitable separation. Airport is something that symbolizes unavoidable separation. Unavoidable separation. Unavoidable separation. Here is the next question. See you soon, Amma reflects what? So when the poet leaves at the airport, she says these words, see you soon. So I think it has hope mixed with fear, because पूरी poem में author को ये fear होता है ना कि यार क्या होगा क्या नहीं होगा, she's aging, she's getting old day by day. So yes, there was hope, but there was also fear in her thoughts, fear in her words. See you soon, Amma. Then the repeated smile indicates what? Happiness, politeness, emotional repression, or formality. So emotional repression would be correct because she had to control her feelings, control her emotions. Emotional outburst वो नहीं कर सकती थी. So it should be emotional repression given in option C. Which theme dominates the poem? Childhood, nostalgia, feminism, aging and mortality, or does it talk about nature's beauty? Which theme dominates the poem? So the theme here should be aging and mortality. Aging और mortality उसी बात के ऊपर सारा discussion, सारे poet के thoughts उसी के around revolve करते हैं. The poem ends with what? Resolution, acceptance, silent fear, and emotional control? Or does it end with some kind of optimism, some kind of positivity? So यार positivity तो कुछ नहीं था. It was just silent fear and emotional control that the poet displayed at the airport. So that ends all the discussion around this poem, My Mother at 66. Now we quickly move to the next poet from your Flamingo, and that is Keeping Quiet. Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda. And क्या क्या चीजें इंपॉर्टेंट थी इस पोएम में, क्या इसका बैकड्रॉप था और क्या इसकी समरी है, क्या इसके एमसीक्यूज हैं, we'll focus on all those things. So the poem is written by Pablo Neruda, one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, a Chilean poet. Chilean is basically, he was from Chile in South America. Poet, diplomat, and Nobel Prize winner, Neruda is known for blending personal emotion with political and philosophical reflection as well. Personal emotion के साथ साथ political and philosophical reflection भी करते हैं. His poetry often addresses human suffering and exploitation, जो अभी हम पढ़ने वाले हैं. Because he was a diplomat, देखो diplomat लिखा हुआ है ना, so he must have lived in many countries. So war और इन चीजों के ऊपर भी इन्होंने काफी लिखा, war and violence, need for peace and introspection among human beings. Human beings को अपने thoughts समझने होंगे. Why are we doing what we are doing? And collective human responsibility. Keeping Quiet reflects Neruda's belief in inner silence can lead to outer transformation. That is what he believes. कि अगर अंदर से हम अपने आप को कंट्रोल कर लेंगे, that will help us in the external transformation. ठीक है. Hi guys, hi. चलो. So ये हुआ about the poet. Now let's talk about the backdrop of this poem. Poem कब लिखी गई थी उस टाइम, क्या सिनेरियो चल रहा था वर्ल्ड में. The poem was written in the post World War era, when world was grappling with these things. The aftermath of large scale violence. Aftermath is the consequences that happen after an event. The arms race and nuclear threat, environmental destruction, emotional alienation caused by relentless material progress, relentless use of technology, relentless use of these nuclear and armed weapons. So World War II के backdrop पे ये poem set है. Now अगर World War II के ऊपर है, so of course क्या होना चाहिए आगे, कि there is a need for silence. I think it was somewhere for World War II. So there is need for peace among people. लोग एक दूसरे को लोग नहीं समझ रहे हैं, they are killing each other for no reason. So ये इस poem का backdrop है. And the poet says, let's stay silent for 12 minutes. So he emphasizes a lot on this number 12. Now why does he do that? ये बात अभी आपको समझ में आएगी. So the backdrop is a world obsessed with activity, productivity, and dominance, where silence is mistaken for inactivity or death. So the world that was so obsessed with activity, productivity and these things, silence को लोग ऐसा मानते थे कि silence है मतलब खत्म है, inactive है. ठीक है. Neruda challenges this notion by proposing a temporary conscious pause, moment of shared silence to help humanity introspect, heal, and of course reconnect with each other. And of course people reconnecting with each other. Importantly, the poet clarifies that he is not advocating total inaction or death. He is not advocating कि बात ही मत करो, शांत बैठ जाओ. नहीं. He says just sit for some minutes and have that introspection. अपने thoughts को समझो कि क्या कर रहे हैं, क्यों कर रहे हैं, is it worth it, is it not. So he just wants people कि आप बैठो and समझो, अपने thoughts को assess करो. But a brief meaningful stillness that allows humans to understand themselves and other better. कि human beings अपने एक्शंस को भी समझे एंड ऑफ कोर्स दूसरे के बारे में भी समझे. The poem begins with the poet urging everyone to count up to 12. ये 12 का बड़ा importance है. And remain still. The number 12 symbolically represents completeness and universality. 12 months, 12 hours, 12 zodiac signs, suggesting that this pause should involve all of humanity. It should involve all of humanity. That means it should involve everyone. During this moment of silence, what does he want? He wants no one to speak any language, removing barriers of nationality and culture. If we're not speaking any language, that by default means कि we are now behaving as one, because जहाँ language होता है वहाँ differences होता है. Humans would stop harmful activities such as war, exploitation, and environmental destruction. So that is what he wanted during those minutes of silence. The poet imagines a world. What kind of a world that he imagines? Where fishermen do not harm whales, so environment को नुकसान नहीं होगा. Salt gatherers pause to reflect on their wounded hands. Salt gatherers जो लोग salt निकालते हैं उनके हाथ जो है वो पूरे damage हो जाते हैं. Those involved in wars experience a sudden realization of futility of violence, usefulness of violence. Neruda anticipates a misunderstanding and clarifies that it is not asking people to embrace death or complete inactivity. Instead, he advocates a pause that brings self-awareness. He's talking about self-awareness. He's talking about self-consciousness. The poem concludes with a powerful natural metaphor. And metaphor क्या है? What metaphor are we talking about? The earth remains alive even in stillness. The earth remains alive even in stillness. ये metaphor discuss हुआ है. Humans too can learn and grow during moments of quiet introspection, and that concludes the poem, Keeping Quiet. So we are done with the poem and the summary. Now we will focus on some figures of speech जो यहाँ पे use हुए, and of course then I'll come with some MCQs as well. So symbolism का बहुत use हुआ है बेटा पूरे chapter पूरी poem में. Symbolism, silence, stillness symbolizes introspection, self-awareness, self-consciousness of exactly what you people are doing. Counting to 12 expresses universality and completeness, and earth symbolizes life continuing through balance. It symbolizes life continuing through balance. So symbolism used हुआ है students यहाँ पे. Next up what we have used, we've used metaphor as well. हमने यहाँ पे metaphor भी use किया है. Sudden strangeness, unfamiliar peace that forces reflection. Unfamiliar feast that forces reflection. तो यहाँ पे they have used metaphor. Imagery, of course, whales के बारे में. Whale actual में वहाँ आपको दिख तो नहीं रहा है, but it says whales being hunted, salt gatherers with injured hands, soldiers preparing for war. So he evokes imagery in these lines. Then repetition, of course, the emphasis on not speaking, not moving reinforces the central idea of the pause that he was advocating, the pause that he wanted everyone to take. So we are done with figures of speech that were used in this poem. Now I have 5 MCQ type questions, students, from this poem, Keeping Quiet. Counting up to 12 symbolizes what? 5 MCQs हम करने वाले हैं. Counting up to 12 symbolizes universality and unity, और 12 का importance भी बताया, 12 का क्या reference है वो भी discuss किया. The poet's idea of silence primarily aims to do what? He wants everyone to be silent, but why? Does he want to promote laziness, end all work permanently, or encourage self-reflection, or escape reality? क्या करना चाह रहे हैं poet? Through silence, He wants to encourage self awareness, self reflection, introspection करने के लिए बोल रहा है. ठीक है. Why does the poet mention no language? He says for 12 minutes we will not speak any language. Why does he say that? To promote silence, to remove barriers between humans, to avoid conflict, to suggest ignorance. So I think the correct answer should be to remove barriers between humans. To remove barriers between humans. The reference to whales highlight what? So अगर whale hunting चल रहा है, so that is again environmental exploitation, which is given in option C, students, which is given in option C. Brings us to the last question, students. The earth is used as an example to show what? Nature's anger, constant, no, it is used to express life continues in balance. It is used to talk about life's continuity and talk about the balance that is needed. So, Bacha Party, that brings us to the end of today's discussion, which was around the poems Keeping Quiet and My Mother at 66. I'll be back in the next week with 3 more poems in one session, or फिर Flamingo khatam hoga, we'll start discussing the chapters from your vistas. That's all for today, students. Thank you so much. Bye bye.